Hey, it's Drybear. We're continuing our class guide series for Dragonflight, and today we're going to be talking about the Restoration Druid in Mythic Plus dungeons. We'll go over all the builds, important aspects. I'll give you some talent builds that you can import directly into your game from the description down below. We'll talk about how to play, the rotation, and what to look out for. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. All right, let's talk Restoration Druid in Mythic Plus. I would argue is probably the strongest healer in Mythic Plus right now. A lot of flexibility. They have a battle rest. Their healing is very mobile. The only weakness that Resto Druid has in Mythic Plus is the weakness they've always had, which is emergency healing on multiple targets. Like when the whole group drops low and you don't have Flourish ready, or if one target drops really low and you have a small window of time to get them back up. Your only options really are Swift Mend, Nature Swiftness, but if those aren't available, it's going to take a little bit of ramp to get that person back up. And so one of the challenges with playing Resto Druid is you have to kind of predict the damage. If you think damage is coming, you start pre-hotting, putting heal over time effects on your party mates so that when the damage hits, you're ready to build off of that heal over time ramp up. But that's kind of the core of it. Once you master it, they're super flexible. Their bear form gives a lot of options for defense. They can take hits, and they can also move around. They have Stampeding Roar for movement speed as well. Let's talk about the core gameplay. We'll talk about some builds, and we'll go from there. Class tree-wise, this is probably one of my least favorite class trees in the game, is the one for Resto Druid. There's a lot in here. Most of it's inaccessible in very awkward ways. Technically, of the 6 healers, only one of them, Priest, doesn't have an interrupt in their tree. But I'm at the point now where I'm willing to say that until we get to 10.0.5, where this class tree is getting reworked and some things are being moved around, some new connections are being made so you can make better paths. Right now, it's kind of inaccessible. The reason being is that you have to spend 3 points in Killer Instinct and then 1 point in Skull Bash. And it's 4 points out of the way. You already have so many things down here that you want to get to. You're already having to sacrifice a lot, like not being able to get Typhoon for Sanguine, some of the other pieces here. So just keep that in mind. You really won't be able to go for an interrupt if your group really needs it, just because it's going to put you really out of sorts. But there are some cool things in here that are super useful. You absolutely need Rejuvenation and Swift Mend. That is non-negotiable. And you also need your Cleanse as well. Super important. So even getting this modifier here, you would additionally remove all curse and poison. Without it, it only does magic. So you need to pick up Improved Nature's Cure. There's so many poison effects that are nasty. There's some curses that are livable, but for the most part, being able to remove them is nice. You also absolutely need Wild Growth. That is non-negotiable. You need it. You can't not have it. So don't even think about not having it in general. Down here on the bottom tree, you can pick up Ursul's Vortex. This allows you to place down a circle. Anyone that gets hit by it, when they cross the threshold, they'll be pulled back into it. It can be useful for some mobs like Nakud Offensive, pulling on the first boss, pulling the mobs back that are trying to go to the catapults. Innervate is super useful. You hit a target, usually yourself, in Mythic Plus, and it makes it so you don't spend any mana for the next 10 seconds. And then one of the new things we got is Nature's Vigil. This one's super fun. For the next 30 seconds, all single target healing also damages a nearby enemy, and you can do some pretty respectable damage with this up as well. On the left side, well in the middle at least, Soothe is great. This helps you in raging weeks and some of the mobs that enrage, like in Algathar. Stampeding Roar is a big one. This is a 2-minute cooldown. Allows you to speed up everyone in your party. This is super useful, like in Halls of Valor, running away from Odin when he has the big AoE. Very useful. And then left side here, also very valuable. The first one is going to be Incapacitating Roar. This one fills in a little bit for your interrupt. It doesn't work on mobs that are CC immune, but it's super nice. It's a 30-second cooldown. You can use it outside of bear form. When you activate it, it'll roar. Any mobs that are nearby that can be CC'd will be incapped, and it will they'll cancel immediately. So it's really good for interrupting abilities and stopping mobs. Here is super useful. Well-honed Instincts allows you to heal yourself up every 90 seconds. When you drop below 40% health, you heal yourself back up with Frenzied Regeneration. This means you don't have to heal yourself as much. And then Protector of the Pack can end up doing a lot of damage You store up healing, and then your next Moonfire consumes it. So as you heal, you can do a Moonfire. I've had it crit for like 60, 70K just on the initial hit. So super awesome, big thing to pick up. That's the class trait. Let's talk about the spec tree that you're gonna want to know about. And let's begin with just your general HOTS. You are a heal over time class. That is your forte. So let's talk about what you have available. The first one is Rejuvenation. This is a single target heal. It's 12.8 seconds, well, depending on your haste. But you put it on the target and you have it marked, and then that will then just start regenerating over time. Your next hot is going to be Wild Growth. This is one of your best ones for raid gameplay and for Mythic Plus gameplay. You target one person and cast it. When it's done, it'll apply a hot to up to 5 people, which if they're in range of each other, you can get the whole group in Mythic Plus. And there's some cool modifications in here that you'll want to play off of to really make sure that you're maximizing that. But you have Rejuvenation and Wild Growth. You also have Life Bloom, which is one of your best single target heals, period. Heals the target, and then when it expires or is dispelled, it heals them instantly. So you put this on usually your tank, unless you're running with photosynthesis, but we'll get to that. So you'll be running with that. Life Bloom just heals, 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 and then when it hits 0, you want to let it expire so it blooms. You'll see it go poof. It'll big heal, and then you can put it back on, and managing that on the tank is super useful. Then on top of that, you also have Efflorescence. This is your ground target heal. So you put this on the ground. It's a nice little bonus. The reason for that is that your mastery is your healing is increased for each of your heal over time effects on the target, and you can actually get one through Efflorescence if you're running it, which can make it even better. You just want to have this down at all times. It's a nice little boon. It can end up contributing a fair amount to your overall healing. Then Base Kit Druid also has Regrowth. This is your emergency single target heal. It does a single target, you cast it. It does a upfront heal, and then it puts a heal over time effect on them, which will modify your mastery. So you can end up having tons and tons of HOTS on one single person. We are keeping the Adaptive Swarm from Shadowlands, one of my favorite abilities from Shadowlands. It is another HOT or a dot, depending on which target you put it on. And it increases the effectiveness of your periodic effects on them while they have the swarm on them. And then when it expires, it finds a new target and tries to alternate between friend and foe. So you just want to be keeping this on cooldown. You throw it out, it has stacks for how many times it can jump. But while you have it on that person, all of your other HOTS are healing better. So it helps you really deal with that weakness of having single target. Most people will run Unbridled Swarm, which means that it has a chance when it jumps to split into 2. So you can, if you get lucky, end up having Adaptive Swarm on the entire party all at once, which is increasing all of your HOTS on them by 25%. Super cool, super nasty. If you are running it, Spring Blossoms is the HOT that I talked about earlier. So when you have Efflorescence on the ground and you have Spring Blossoms equipped, it'll apply another HOT, which will affect your mastery. It's usually why you have it. If you're not running that, I've been messing around with some other options down here on the other side of the tree, even making Convoke even a little bit better. But just be aware this is another HOT. So you can throw out Life Bloom, you can throw out Rejuve, you can throw out Regrowth, you can throw out Wild Growth, you can throw out your Adaptive Swarm, and then you have another one which is really good for dungeons, Cenarian Ward. This one you want to use on cooldown. You put a Cenarian Ward on a target. When they take damage, it'll instantly heal them. It'll heal them over time. So this one has to be damage activated. It lasts 30 seconds, and then it pops. So it's another HOT. So you can have all of these rolling on one target all at one time, and it really, really helps you just keep single targets up and alive. The other one to think about is a tank external, is your Iron Bark. This one is super useful. The 1.2 minute cooldown for 20% damage reduction. Not as good as Blessing of Sacrifice or Pain Suppression from Disc Priest and Holy Paladin, but it is very reliable, very useful. So you want to be throwing this out on the tank or any single target that you know is going to take a lot of damage. It lasts a good amount of time, and it's just a nice little external damage reduction. So those are your HOT options. Let's go through the talent options and cooldown options that you have, and then we'll put it all together and talk about gameplay, rotation, that sort of thing. We're also keeping Convoke the Spirits from Shadowlands. This one is a super cool cooldown. It's a 1 minute cooldown if you have the modifier underneath it, which is nice. You activate it, and then you channel, and then you shoot out random spells depending on what form you're in. If you're playing Resto Druid, you can actually switch into Cat for extra damage, or into Moonkin form if you have it talented, and it will prefer to cast spells from the form that you're in, but generally you'll be using it as a way to put up a bunch of hots on a lot of people. It'll try to cast Wild Growth, Swiftmend, Moonfire, Wrath, Regrowth, Rejuve, Rake, and Thrash. You can see that Thrash, Rake, Moonfire, and Wrath are offensive spells, and it does have 4 hots in there as well, so it'll random between them. I'm messing around a lot with Cenariad's guidance. This makes the Convoke the Spirits cooldown less, its duration less, so it's a little bit weaker, but more often, and it has an increased chance to use really good spells like Wild Growth. And it can actually as well pop up very short versions. It doesn't say here on the tooltip, but it can pop short versions of things like Flourish. I've seen it pop up like a 3-second version of Flourish. So when you have this modified, it's incredibly useful. You can get lucky and it can pop a lot. So that's one of your options for cooldowns. If you really need, you can do it while you're on the move. If you need to get some hots up on a bunch of people, you want to do it earlier, because if you do it as a last resort and you don't get good randomness on it, you can really suffer from it, but just know that that is there as an option. The big thing that you want to manage as expertly as you can is Flourish. This is one of your best cooldowns by far. So what Flourish does is it extends the duration of all your heal over time effects on friendly targets. It is an instant cast. When you cast this, it instantly extends the duration of all your hots that are active right now and doubles the heal over time rate for 8 seconds. So it's most effective if you can have a lot of hots up and running, especially even if they're like towards the end of their duration. You have those all going, then you pop Flourish, boom, it refreshes all of them, and they start pulsing like absolute crazy. This is your big group cooldown heal. When a bunch of people are dying all at once, or you really need to get the tank up, you use this. It's a 1.5 minute cooldown, and I would hearken this closer to like Wings for Paladin. This is your oh no button. This is your get out of trouble button, and you need to use it properly if you're going to get through some high keys, because it really puts everything together. So Flourish is amazing. Just make sure that as you play, you'll figure out how to best manage it to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. But that is kind of your big win condition. Lastly, you have your raid cooldown Tranquility. This one is not as good in, it's increased when not in raid, but it's not as good for Mythic Plus for several reasons. This is kind of like Divine Hymn from Priest. You stand still and you channel, and then you heal everyone on a tick-based thing that builds up. The longer you channel it, it stacks up more and more healing from it. In Mythic Plus, you don't always get to stand there the whole time and do it, so a lot of times you'll end up getting interrupted, or you'll have to move for some mechanic. I've seen a lot of Resto Druids test with Inner Peace. This reduces the cooldown Tranquility by 60 seconds, so from 3 minutes to 2 minutes, and it also means that when you're channeling it, you take less damage and you're knockback immune. So when you have situations like the Bird and Algathar that are pushing people back, and you have to push back against it, you can get some free heals out of this by standing, resisting the knockback, or even like in Nakud, the third boss, where they do that big gust that pushes everyone back. You can be immune to it and heal people through it, which can be really useful. So if you have the extra point, you can play with Inner Peace, but without Inner Peace on there, Tranquility is like, my cooldowns are down and I want to get some free healing while I wait for cooldowns to come back. You pop up Tranquility, channel it for as long as you can, get some good value out of it, but this isn't like, you know, a rewind from Preservation Evoker that's really going to save the day. It is just one of the tools that you use in combination with Convoke and Flourish to keep people alive. But as I said, the weakest part of Resto Druid is when everyone's in emergency mode, like everyone's about to die or someone's about to die in the next second, and you need to pump some heals, but you didn't pre-hot. There's no hots rolling. You need to ramp up your healing. That is the weakest part of Resto Druid. And part of mastering this class is getting over that hurdle. Now, the photosynthesis that we talked about earlier. You get these combinations for Life Bloom that makes Life Bloom absolutely bonkers. It's so good. So when you have Life Bloom on yourself, your periodic heals heal 20% faster. So while Life Bloom's on you, all of your heals heal faster. And then when you have, while your Life Bloom is on an ally, your periodic heals on them have a chance to cause it to bloom, which can make it do a big bonus of damage, which is nice. Then you get Budding Leaves. Life Bloom's healing is increased by 6% each time it heals, up to 90%, and then the final bloom is even higher. amazing. Letting Life Bloom expire is huge. Then you pick up Undergrowth, which means that you can have, this is the secret, you have Life Bloom on 2 targets at once and increases the healing. So if you wanted to, you can have Life Bloom on the tank, Life Bloom on yourself to trigger photosynthesis, or you can have Life Bloom on 2 DPS if they're really in trouble. But having double Life Bloom plus that effect makes Life Bloom even better for your overall healing. On top of that, you run Verdancy. When Life Bloom blooms, up to 3 targets within your efflorescence are healed for 10,000, whatever, based on your spell power healing. Another reason why to always have your efflorescence down, and as the fight moves, you want to keep up. There's no cooldown for efflorescence. It doesn't cost that much mana. So you want to be kind of moving it as the fight moves around, especially if you're running Spring Blossoms. It's another hot for you to scale off your mastery. So make sure you're picking that up. The next thing to talk about is Soul of the Forest. This one is another mastery element for Resto Druid. Swift Mend increases the healing of your next regrowth or rejuvenation by 150%, or your next wild growth by 50%. In most scenarios, both Raid and in Mythic Plus, you'll usually be trying to get the wild growth bonus. So what this means is that when you have a hot rolling on someone, you can Swift Mend them at default. It'll consume the hot, heal them, and give them a hot as well. So you can pop it up, you get the Swift Mend hot, but when you consume a hot that way, Soul of the Forest activates, and your next regrowth can be super fat, it's 150%, your next rejuve can be really fat, or your next wild growth can be really fat. Most of the time, you're just farming Swift Mend on cooldown to make your next wild growth huge, because that makes the whole party heal up much faster, so be aware of that. There's also another build that you don't see as much in Mythic Plus, but Verdant Infusion, one of my favorite builds. Swift Mend no longer consumes a heal and extends the duration of your heal over time effects on the target by 12 seconds. So it's super cool. And instead of, because if you have a whole bunch of heals on the target, make sure that you are aware of that. Swift Mend, in order for it to work, you have to have a hot on someone, right? So you cannot use Swift Mend on a target if they don't have a hot that can be consumed by it. So throw a rejuve on them, throw a regrowth on them, throw a wild growth on them, and then you can consume one. It gives you the Soul of the Forest, and then you can do a really big wild growth on the whole group and get some massive, massive group healing out of that. And that's basically the core of the talents and the abilities. This one is a Convoke variation on the generic build, just using Cenarius Guidance to get more value out of Convoke, just so you can have a shorter cooldown on it. I'll put this down in the description. I call this one Convoke Plus because you're boosting up your Convoke. But the general pieces are here. The variants that you'll see on this, specifically for Mythic Plus, is sometimes getting Spring Blossoms if you're playing more Mastery. Typically for Mythic Plus, you run Haste as your primary. But if you want to try with a Spring Blossoms build, you certainly can. But this is what I would consider, I'll put this one in the description, as a general M+ build. It includes Spring Blossoms, which really helps you keep people alive. When you have Efflorescence on the ground, you'll get the extra hot from it. Really helps out a lot. I would consider the Convoke build better, but when it comes to Mythic Plus, I don't think there's too much variation in this tree, specifically in the spec tree for Resto Druid. Photosynthesis, budding leaves, and undergrowth are super strong, very hard to ignore. Adaptive Swarm with the extra split, very strong. Invoke the Spirits, you want it over Tree of Life. It's too long of a cooldown for Mythic Plus. Flourish is just necessary for some of the damage encounters. So I think relative to other healers, there's less variation when it comes to Mythic Plus, but you can play with things like Inner Peace that makes your Tranquility better and makes you immune to knockbacks, which can be useful. You can play with Spring Blossoms if you like to have an extra hot, which scales your mastery. You can play with a Convoke Plus to make the Convoke better, but that is kind of the core kit of the talents. Now let's talk about how to play it and put it all together. This is Resto Druid in 15 Nakud, just as an example. Damage output, you want to make sure you're putting Moonfire. It's going to be your biggest contribution outside, just in general. If you can have the time to dot up individual targets, it's super useful, very valuable. Then in general, you want to rely on Wild Growth for your big AoE heals. Keep Life Bloom up, because again, it procs and explodes on the tank. Keep it on yourself with Photosynthesis. Gives you tons of AoE healing, which is really nice. And then you're kind of applying rejuves when people need it. I usually have 2 or 3 rejuves up unless I know a big damage window is coming, or I'm about to use Flourish so I can get extra value out of those. Regrowth is your emergency heal. It does consume a lot of mana, Mana isn't really a big problem for Resto Druid in Mythic Plus, but it can be depending on how you're managing it and how fast you're pulling. So just be aware you don't want to be spamming regrowth. Let the hots do the work. There's a lot of times too where mastering Resto Druid is more about knowing how much healing you're going to have based on hots that are active and how much damage is still coming in. Because there are times where you'll see that I'll have people at like 10% health. I know there's no more damage coming and they have hots on them. So I leave them at 10% health to slowly work their way back up because I know there's no threat to their life anymore. So you can work on other things and manage that out. Keep Adaptive Swarm on cooldown. Keep Swiftmend on cooldown and stack up your Soul of the Forest to get the Wild Growth procs to give you the extra little bit. Convoke the Spirits is awesome for when you're moving. Use that cooldown to kind of move around and keep up with the target. You can also use it for offense if you'd like, especially if you're running with the bonus one. On top of that, you have Tranquility as a backup, but I wouldn't rely on it too much. And then obviously Flourish is big. So one of the best ways to use Flourish, keep Life Bloom on yourself for photosynthesis. Then you want to use Swiftmend to trigger Soul of the Forest, which makes your next Wild Growth even better. Proc that up, and then when it ticks, then you can use Flourish to pop everything up, get a whole bunch of healing. When there's problems, make sure you're putting rejuves out. You can switch Life Bloom from the tank to a target that's taking a lot of damage. Use Cenarian Ward on cooldown. It's a great way to keep DPS alive. And then just make sure that your Adaptive Swarm is hitting it. And then you can just reposition as much as you want based on how much mobility you have. You have Iron Bark for externals. You can use it on tanks. Some dungeons like Shadow Moon Burial Grounds have sometimes will dot someone up and they'll take tons and tons of single target damage. Iron Bark's useful for that as well, so you can make sure that you keep that one person alive and prevent them from dying. On top of that, that's basically the core of the rotation. It's very different than most healers. It's not like a one-to-one of person is hurt, I apply unhurt. You're more of kind of balancing, okay? Who has hots, who doesn't? Which hots do they have? If they already have Rejuve, you don't want to recast Rejuve on them again. They already have Life Bloom. You want that to expire before you put Life Bloom back again. You want to see where your Life Bloom is, especially if you're running with the double Life Bloom, so you can take care of it. Make sure you put Swiftmend on cooldown if you have to. You can use Soul of the Forest for a single target Rejuve or a single target Regrowth. When someone drops really low, use Nature Swiftness, which makes your next cast instant. I usually do this for Regrowth so that you can get them popped up. Remember, your Mastery makes it so your healing is higher when they have more hots on them. And then you're just kind of getting into this step function. I would recommend if you're new to Resto Druid, take a step, cast a spell. Take a step, cast a spell, and just kind of get into that rhythm of moving and doing a hot and moving and doing a hot and moving and doing a hot, because you're basically wanting to do that every global cooldown to make sure that you're stacking things up. And at first, it may seem kind of stressful compared to other healers because you can't get that big single target hit. But as you get comfortable managing where all your hots are, seeing who has what hot, where can you put new hots, and just like, where's everyone at? What can I add on top of it? You can see that the healing is just absolutely insane. It stacks up really, really easily, and you have a lot of really cool options. So that's Resto Druid. I just wanted to cover it in a nutshell for people that are trying to get into Resto Druid, trying to figure it out. The builds are down in the description. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, leave me a like. I don't know, or don't. Who cares? And of course, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.